turn my camera on so no one really here. If I can find the. Okay, here we go. The field day, as we mentioned, is coming up on June 28th, 29th. Excuse me, my voice is a little rough. And same place we've had it for several years out at Prospect Arena. And that's, I don't have the address in front of me, but it's on our it's on our website, WW2x.org. It's out on West 52nd Avenue. You go west on 52nd from Ward Road, and about 3/4 of a mile, I'd say. On the right-hand side is Prospect Arena, and if you come to the stop sign at Eldridge Street, you went too far. You just missed it by a half a block or so, probably. Anyway, that will be our event for this month, and like I say, we need help on Saturday morning, 8 o'clock. Help set up the stuff, and also on Sunday around noon to help tear down. We'll have refreshments. We'll have food, hot dogs, burritos, cold drinks, chips and donuts, and all the good ham food, So it's a lot of fun. Come in and join and enjoy. Get on the air. I say bring, if you got friend, neighbor, or relative or somebody that's interested in ham radio, or that you think you can get interested in ham radio, we'll bring them out. We'll get them on the air, and have a great time. It's a really fun outing. Hopefully the weather will be nice to us. And Sunday morning we're going to launch a Pico balloon, probably around 9 o'clock before winds start to come up. We did that last year, thanks to Peter, and it made it out to the Colorado border. Some of these Pico balloons have made it around the Earth numerous times, so you can always hope for that. But maybe we'll get a little farther than the eastern Colorado border this year. But we'll be tracking it. It's real fun thing to track and to do. HamCon Colorado is in October. It's October 24th, 25th, 26th. And this year it's in Grand Junction. And you can go to hamconcolorado.com, all one word there, hamconcolorado.com. The early bird reservations expire on June 30th, and you'll save $10, I think, if you make and pay your reservation before June 30th. That's coming up here. Kathy and I and Lance Wilson, his wife, Jean, we're taking the train over. So that'll be an adventure in itself, over to Grand Junction. This is the the ARRL Rocky Mountain Convention. The Rocky Mountain Conventions rotate every year between Colorado, New Mexico, Wyoming, and Utah. A lot of times Wyoming backs out, but that's the rotation of it. So this is the Colorado year, and the committee picked Grand Junction. There's some good rates on hotel rooms. I think they're $129, which is pretty good rate for a hotel, and it's a nice hotel. I'm trying to think of the name of it, but it's a major hotel, and right there in Grand Junction. There'll be a lot of speakers. You can do your meals on the website, and they appear a little pricey, but that's what you get when you go to stuff like that. And then you figure, I don't know, it's kind of the way it is nowadays. Everything's pretty expensive. So, but don't let that stop you. Try to make it over there. Let's see. Do I have anything else, Field Day? We've had a request for ham radio coverage to help with the Rally Colorado. It's a car race. It's July 19th and 20th in Rangeley. And I've had a couple people call or send me emails. I've given them the information. So apparently there's some interest in that. A lady named Paula N60QQ is the at least for the comm part of it. She's the chief of communications. It says for the Rally Colorado. So I'm sure that'll be a lot of fun, and they need the help for communications. They say food's provided, and come and have a lot of fun. So there you go. One last thing, I believe we're looking at been putting together things to do hybrid meetings, we're calling them. And as most of you know, we used to do in-person meetings, and then along came COVID, and I've been doing virtual meetings like this for 5 years or thereabouts or more. So we're going to do hybrid meetings probably starting in July. I think 16th of July. And we've been accumulating some needed equipment, and I think we've got everything. Peter's kind of heading that up, and we're going to give it a go. It'll be over at the Lakewood Police Department down in the community room, I guess they call it, on the lower level. And so we'll have that out in the roundtable. Also, we'll be doing probably a couple email blasts on it. But, if you choose not to do that, you can still attend the meeting just like this. But I know there's a lot of members that are looking forward to getting together and face to face. So, it's going to get everybody an opportunity to do what they want to do, come or do it virtually. If you've helped with the Lakewood siren tests before, that's the same room down there where we have pizza after the siren test, and it's on Allison Parkway, right off of Alameda West, just West Alameda, just west of Wadsworth. There's a lot of parking, especially that time of night, up on the upper level, which you turn into before you actually get to the PD. And there's also a few handicap there by the building if you need a handicap spot. Don't take one if you don't need it, obviously. But anyway, that's the plan. We'll get more news out on that, and look forward to it. I think it will be fun to do. Okay, I think that's all I've got. Looks like we've got about 17 attendees here, so appreciate that. Any questions for me or about the club or whatever before I turn it over to Jerome? And we don't have a formal presentation. We're going to do a video, and which they're interesting. So it's kind of like a presentation without the personal part of it. So anyway, I'll quit yakking. Any questions for me or about the club? If not, we'll throw it over to Jerome and let him do his magic on the computer. So patrolling the ether in World War II looks like it's going to be the subjects.
Yep, either that, or if anybody has any interest in Radio Caroline, these were the two that I chose. So I think the patrolling the Ethernet is probably what we're going to watch.
Okay. Again, thanks everybody for attending, and here we go.
Give me a second here. Sorry.
Hello, this is Patrolling the Ether, the FCC in World War II, for the Antique Wireless Museum YouTube channel. We're going to talk about two wartime FCC departments, the first being the FBIS, or Foreign Broadcast Information Service, and the other, the RID, the Radio Intelligence Division. We're going to talk about the radios and antennas and other specialized equipment that both groups used. We're also going to talk about some RID techniques, including long distance and close-in high frequency radio direction finding, jamming, and also spoofing. And at the end of this presentation, we're going to see excerpts from a terrific 1944 dramatic video showing the RID in action. This story started for me at the Shelby, North Carolina Hamfest 2013, when a buddy of mine from New Bern, North Carolina, brought what looked like a piece of test gear in a wooden cabinet. Here's a picture of the front panel. You can see it has a speaker in the middle, magic eye over to the left, headphone jack, antenna connections over on the right, a switch to turn off the antenna, also a number of controls at the bottom, including a BFO. My friend had it on eBay twice, but no nibbles at all, so he brought it to the Hamfest. And he describes it here in the listing as a possible OSS receiver. Now, the only reference that we could find at that time was for a similar unit written up in Wireless for the Warrior, and this was about an SSR 201 that was found in a museum in Belgium. Here's a close-up picture of it. Looks very similar, and it's SSR 201, which stands for Special Surveillance Receiver, Model 201. And of course, the difference is it's in a different Naugahyde case. Now, Wireless for the Warrior said there's very little known about this aperiodic wideband surveillance receiver. Appears to have been manufactured in a relatively small quantity by a small workshop having only semi-professional facilities, and no specific military components are used in its construction. Rather, U.S. commercially branded parts are found. Now, also on the web, I came across this wonderful, basically an online book, large PDF, entitled The History of the Radio Intelligence Division Before and During World War II, collected and put on the web by Dan Flanagan, W3DF, a good friend of mine now. And this was based on some writings from George Sterling, who was the chief of the Radio Intelligence Division during World War II, and also a ham. His original call was 3DF or W3DF, and later in his retirement, he moved to Maine, and at that time, you had to change your call if you moved into a different call area, so you ended up with W1AE. Here's a picture of George Sterling in his retirement. He's sending Morse with his right hand and writing with his left hand, which is an example of how the early commercial Morse operators did things. Here's actually George Sterling's early spark key that he used as a radio ship operator in the early 20s. Before that, he'd been a radio instructor with the Signal Corps in World War I in Europe. But the key was given to another RID man late in George's life. Now here's George's early QSL card, and he is the Assistant U.S. Radio Inspector for the 3rd District. And you'll notice about halfway down in the QSL card it says violations. So he's looking for violations and making comments of the quality of the signal, the frequency, and all that. He's also, if you look over to the left under transmitter, he's using a loop experimental. So he was already working with loop antennas back in 1924. Now, George teamed up with a gentleman named Robert Cruz, who was formerly the technical editor for QST, And they produced the radio manual, which was at least as popular as the ARRL handbook, which also started around 1928. The radio manual had 4 editions from 1928 on and was a very popular reference book. Now, the Federal Radio Commission had been created in 1927 to help license broadcasters and minimize interference, and also to do some frequency measuring and transmitters inspections from time to time on ships and also AM broadcast stations. Their main monitoring site at that time was Grand Island, Nebraska. They didn't have any ADCOC high-frequency direction finding capability early on, but as World War II came on the horizon, site expansions began. Here's a postcard from Grand Island, Nebraska, pre-World War II. And you'll notice at the bottom it says, "Monitors the radio stations of the world." Now, in June 1940, the government decided there would be no more international contacts for U.S. hams, even though we weren't at war with anyone. That same month, W1AW transmitted the first code practice over the air in support of the upcoming war effort to help people practice their Morse. Also in September 1940, a group called the National Defense Operations within the FCC was created. Also, all licensed hams had to submit photos, fingerprints, and proof of citizenship by October 15th of 1940. Now, during World War II, radio skills paid, and paid well. A lot of people were looking for radio operators. The Army, the Navy, and a number of civilian organizations, including the FCC. So the NDO, or National Defense Operations, evolved into the RID and the FBIS. Pretty good money. Median income in 1940 was about $1,000 a year. So a radio operator started off at about twice that. A monitoring officer, 1.5 times that, and supervisor, $3,200. And if you had language skills and could analyze broadcast and write commentary, you could make even more than that. So everything changed on December 7th, 1941. U.S. hams had to go QRT on December 8th. In other words, no more transmitting with anyone on any frequency that was capable of going international. So anything below 56 megacycles was prohibited. They could still receive, though. Also, by March 1942, over 15,000 hams were already in the military. So there was still a need for low-powered communications. So the ARRL helped to create the War Emergency Radio Service, or WERS. It was basically their equivalent of our 2 meters and 440. It was for company use, air raids, national disasters, that type of thing. The government, the organization was licensed with the WERS license, but you had to have a ham license to also operate the equipment. And most of this was low-powered, mostly homebrew rigs. Here's an example of a commercially made WERS radio that you've probably seen at Hamfest and wondered who used it. And that's the Abbott transmitter receiver model TR4. And again, it was on 2.5 meters, super regenerative detector, range from 5 to 75 miles. So during the World War II, the FCC organization grew significantly up to over 100 locations in the U.S., Alaska, Hawaii, Puerto Rico, and even points beyond. Washington, D.C. was the central point. The FCC monitored all foreign broadcast. They also developed high-frequency direction finding capabilities, started monitoring the airwaves. They also developed mobile surveillance capability, and all the monitoring sites were guarded. Here's a picture of Grand Island now in August 1942. You'll notice they have a gate and a gate guard. I want to talk about the Foreign Broadcast Intelligence Service first. So this was set up to record and analyze all foreign broadcasts from as many countries as they could get, looking for any up-to-the-minute news that they could share with other government agencies, any kind of intelligence, any type of propaganda that was being said, so that we could come up with countermeasures if need be. The FBIS was headed by a gentleman named Harold Graves, and they had a number of different translation rooms. Here's by 25 August 1941, the FBMS, which was the Foreign Broadcast Monitoring Service, which they called that, and they switched it to the FBIS shortly thereafter. Notice all the different languages that they had capabilities of translating and analyzing. The FBIS put out a number of different wire services to different organizations, depending on what it was. The A wire went to pretty much everybody. There was the propaganda went to B wire people, kind of like listservs, if you would, et cetera, et cetera. Here's an interesting one. The FCC really didn't want Americans listening to foreign broadcasts because of the propaganda there is, but a lot of people were listening for any type of mention of loved ones, POWs, and that type of thing. And so what the FBIS started doing was sending out e-wires or telegrams when someone was mentioned as being a POW and that type of thing. And that was to try to eliminate people doing it on their own. So the FBIS had what was called broadcast recording units. The first one was at Laurel, Maryland. Then it was moved to Silver Hill, Maryland, so that Laurel could become a FCC training center. So, and you can see here that a couple of FBIS operators and all their equipment that's in use, and so they captured, they recorded these and sent the recordings to Washington or elsewhere to the translation rooms, and it went from there. One of the pieces of equipment that they're using in that picture is a Memorex paper disc recording. Another way of recording was on, the old dictaphone system, the telecord wax cylinder recording system. The FBIS started in Silver Hill, and you can see they added other sites, especially after Pearl Harbor. And as the war went on, as the front moved further, other FBIS recording unit sites were started around the world. Now, all of these sites had large antenna fields. Here's a couple of pictures of, here's a doublet antenna field at Grand Island, Nebraska. Here's a rhombic field also at Grand Island, Nebraska. Now, the other organization we're going to talk about is the Field Enforcement Division of the FCC, called the Radio Intelligence Division. These were the special agents. These were the only armed members of the FCC. These sites grew from just a handful to over 100 as the war continued, and their job was to monitor the airways, investigate all signals, and there was a lot of worry at first. Every message that was heard, somebody thought it was the Japanese going to invade California and that type of thing. The military wasn't really ready from a radio intelligence point of view when the war started. So one of the big things the RID focused on was training military personnel and field agents in radio intelligence monitoring and radio direction finding techniques. And here's a picture of an RID military training class there in Laurel, Maryland. At the same time, the RID was coming up to speed in terms of patrolling the ether, hearing all signals, even short transmissions, having the ability to do direction finding on those signals, and of course document. Sometimes it was needed to be able to jam a signal so that signal could not get through, either signal coming in from Europe or Asia to the United States or vice versa. Also, in some situations, they spoofed. They were able to pretend or masquerade that they were the foreign control station and actually have conversations with the field agent and find out more information from them. Of course, they shared all this intelligence and trained others. But the primary goal of every RID monitoring station was to cruise the ether. And here we have three gentlemen doing just that. They just keep turning that dial throughout the entire usable HF radio spectrum and making sure that they understand each signal as they hear it. Here's a nice picture of one of the primary monitoring stations in Allegan, Michigan. You see three positions there with some very familiar radios. Over to the left are some small transmitters that were used to communicate with the mobile vans, the mobile surveillance vehicles, and we'll talk about that in a bit too. One of the big needs for the Navy was to get some radio intelligence happening across the Hawaiian chain. So that's what. So they asked the RID to set up 8 new monitoring sites, and it was a 2-year detail. And a number of the key people in the RID were involved in this: George Sterling, Prose Walker, Charlie Ellert, who was the head engineer for the RID, Walt Maxwell, a very famous ham, etc. Here's a nice picture of everybody that was involved in the Hawaiian Island effort. One of my goals is to try to identify each one of these folks. Here's George Sterling and Charlie Ellert in the Punch Bowl in Hawaii before it became a national cemetery. They actually set up a high-frequency direction finding center there. Prose Walker, shown here with Charlie Ellert, he was over all the Hawaiian Island monitoring sites. Here's a couple of pictures from an RID field office in Honolulu. And again, you're starting to see the same type of equipment that we're going to talk about here shortly. Here's another view from a different angle. The RID was also asked to go north to Alaska and set up monitoring stations there. And they did, and they operated it for a couple of years until the military was ready to take them over. In the U.S., a number of different sites were also set up. Possibly the best one turned out to be Chop Mist Hill in Scituate, Rhode Island. They were able to pick up signals from Europe, Africa, Caribbean, South America, Pacific, and from folks within the U.S. They had 183 acres, some 80,000 feet of wire, 11 main antennas, including 2 Adcock high-frequency direction finding systems. And that was for redundancy, but also to try to listen to and DF both sides of a radio conversation. And one of the unintended consequences of all these RID sites was assisting in locating lost aircraft. There was a lot of aircraft flying around, and especially off the coast of the California going to Hawaii, and a lot of aircraft was saved thanks to the radio direction finding at the RID locations. You know, there was a lot of worry down in South America. There were messages being sent reporting ships leaving port and going to Europe, and of course, including one series about the Queen Mary. Of course, this was a huge ocean liner being used as a fast transport, troop transport going to Europe, it typically sailed unescorted because it was so fast, but it certainly could still be sunk. Here's an example of a cybertext example of one of the messages sent about the route of the Queen Mary. So that was the type of messages that were a huge concern. So basically, the foreign ministers of most of the North and South American countries got together and adopted a resolution saying that we needed to take immediate measures to try to eliminate clandestine stations. And most of these were in South America. So the RID sent their own monitoring officers and equipment down, and also started training representatives from these other countries at Laurel, Maryland. And here's some of the RID agents going outside the U.S. Here's one of the RID military South American training classes there at Laurel. Now, who were the big suppliers of the RID in the FBIS? Well, certainly Hallicrafters, who was the largest manufacturer of radios at that time and loved to sell to governments. Also, the Hudson and Ford automobile companies. The SX-28 high-frequency receiver was the primary intercept receiver used by both the FBIS and the RID during World War II. Also, for VHF and UHF, Hallicrafters provided their S-27 receiver, and later their S-36. And these were used at the fixed locations, also in mobile bands, and used portable as well. Now, in the mobile vans, in addition to the SX-28 and the S-27 for intercept, they needed a way to talk back to the base to get information and orders and that type of thing. So they also carried typically an HT6 low-powered transmitter, and also a smaller receiver, the SX-25 super defined. Now there were a couple of special FCC model SX-28s produced, and they have data tags associated with them. One was the SX-28 FCC, and this was the one designed for mobile use. It could be powered by DC, and it also had 12-volt tubes in it. Also, they had a version of the SX-28 called the SSR-202, or Special Surveillance Receiver 202. It had a new dual IF, so you were able to either eliminate one sideband or the other, and even the carrier, if you were in a situation where you had a bad heterodyne interference. This special IF was designed by another RID engineer named James McLaughlin, and it was used by both the RID and the FBIS. And here's an article, picture from QST June 1941, where James McLaughlin describes the selectable single sideband receiving system. Now, they also, as I mentioned, for VHF and UHF, they used the S27, and this is a S27 FCC. One of the requirements that they had for VHF and UHF was be able to zero the S meter from the front panel. So Hallicrafters added the hole right below the data tag there, called S meter adjust, and later on just left it in the product when they sold the product to other government agencies and civilians and that type of thing. Now, all these sites use very specialized antenna, a lot of wire antennas, beverages and doublets for receiving, rhombics, multiple rhombics for transmitting. They also use some specialized gear. For example, the Memorex paper disc recorder we've already mentioned, and the Telecord wax cylinder recorders. You'll also see some ink recorders that are able to record CW at any speed. And also some new long-distance, high-frequency direction finding equipment for long-distance direction finding via skywave, and then also some tools to do it close in, ground wave, which would be loops and handheld devices. Here's a picture of the ink recorder recording the CW. And of course, whatever was recorded had to be transcribed. Now, the long-range direction finding used by the FCC is one built to their own specifications, and it was using a manually rotated adcock antenna in a wooden shelter. And they used a SX28, and they tuned to an aural null. In other words, they're listening and they're tuning until the signal is the minimum. Loops were used in mobile vans, but they were susceptible to night effect errors, skip if you will. But the adcocks were much less immune to this, or much more immune to this, and gave much better bearings over long distances. Here's a picture of the RID Type A adcock system. This one's at Grand Island, circa 1940. You can see the two vertical dipoles, one at each end, that can be manually rotated. This was followed up by the Type B adcock, and this was the one that they used more of. They were built. The shelters were made of wood. They had two per location. One was typically powered by AC, one by DC. They used underground wiring, and each one of these direction finding setups had either a radio, telephone, or a teletype link to the nearest primary center or directly to Washington, D.C. Here's an assistant supervisor, K.W. Miller, taking a bearing with the adcock direction finder. And you can see in the background the SX28. You can also see the Hallicrafter's HT7 frequency standard that was used by a lot of these locations. And they tuned the antenna till they got a null, and that meant that the antenna was broadside to the direction of arrival of the signal. Here's another picture of the same type of equipment in use, we think, at Powder Springs, Georgia, which was also a primary RID site. Later on, they actually had new versions of the Type B adcock. They called it the windbreak, and these started showing up in 1943. And certainly out in Nebraska, out in the plains, they had lots of wind, and so it certainly could have been just to block the wind to make it easier to spin the adcock around, or another benefit would be that people couldn't see what was going on. They couldn't see them in use, couldn't see the equipment, and that may be another reason why they added the windbreak. Now, during the war, the RID was constantly testing themselves, and other people were testing them as well. One time, a portable transmitter was set up at the Pentagon, and with an antenna out the window, just to see how long it would take to be reported. And Situate, Rhode Island, reported it within 7 minutes. Here's a test where the Navy put out a small boat out in the Gulf of Mexico and started transmitting. And the RID took some long distance direction finding fixes, and it took about 20 minutes to get these, and very close in terms of latitude and longitude of the actual ship's location. And here's a mapping showing the various bearings coming in from the various RID locations across the country. The RID also developed mobile surveillance, and these were either Hudson or Ford automobiles with SX28s, S27s, SX25s, HT6s, telecoil wax recorder, a loop to help zero in on a transmitter. And they also had some handheld equipment called snifters that they would use on foot. Of course, these vans had heavy-duty batteries and some power supplies. One interesting addition in all the mobile vans and also at the fixed sites were amateur call books, which back then had listings of all the U.S. and international hams all in one big book. And of course, they also do just what all the hams do these days when they ride around. They look for antennas. Here's the inside picture of a 1939 Ford Deluxe direction finding car being outfitted for the RID. Here's a nice outside shot of a 1940 Hudson direction finding car. The loop at the top was removable. In fact, this picture here shows a number of different loops being available to be used for different frequencies that are stored underneath the primary intercept receiver there, the SX28. Of course, here's a picture of the trunk. They've got an extra battery. Looks like got some power supplies mounted there, etc. And here's a fully fleshed out 1941 Hudson sedan with driver. You can see the intercept receivers there in the back seat. And in the leftmost picture, you can see the intercept operator manually turning the loop. And he's got recording equipment right there if he needs it as well. Here's some information about the loop. It was a Finch model F115A. And again, it was a removable loop. I think the loop also needed a loop coupler that looked like this. Charlie Ellert, who was the chief engineer for the RID, came up with a handheld field strength meter that they would carry on them. And of course, it picked up signals across the spectrum from 200 kc up to 60 megacycles. Here's a picture of the last call book, pre-World War II. It was the winter 1941-42 issue. These were used throughout the RID. Another piece of specialized equipment that was used first by the RID was the panoramic display from Dr. Marcel Wallace, who was a French ham, F3HM, and he also was the founder of Panoramic Radio Corporation in New York City. Here's Dr. Wallace with a follow-on product, a radio spectrograph. It had 100 kc display bandwidth, and certainly this would help in signal and fist analysis and transmitter fingerprinting. But the fact remains, how can we monitor all HF frequencies at once? The fear was, missing a transmission, especially a short transmission. The pan adapter, while a good tool, was not the answer. So there was actually need for some other specialized equipment that wasn't on the market. So the RID had to invent it themselves. And this was the receiver that showed up at Shelby. The Series K aperiodic receiver, manufactured by the Kahn Manufacturing Company, Baltimore, Maryland. AC powered, can be used for unattended monitoring of a nearby transmitter. So there's no radio dial that needs to be turned. It's actually receiving signals from basically any frequency usable for long distance communications from 50 kc up to 60 megacycles all at once. And so it provided an indication of anyone transmitting nearby on any frequency. And the range depended on the antenna used. You could also turn off the antenna if you were really close. These were used fixed locations, portable. They were used in the mobile vans. Anytime they were going to do a stakeout of a prison camp, for example, or a detention center, or outside the German embassy, that type of thing. The RID nickname for the aperiodic receiver was the watchdog, because the operators could lay back and do something else. And, they don't even become concerned if the signals started coming through the aperiodic receiver. And these were designed and built in-house. One of the friends of the RID was another ham, Manuel Kahn, W3ZK of Baltimore. And most of the radio manufacturers were full up with orders, so they talked Mr. Kahn into manufacturing the aperiodic receivers and also the parts for their Adcock direction finding equipment in his basement. And so we know where these were manufactured. In fact, here's an early QSL card from Mr. Kahn, W3ZK there. Now, the war in Europe started in September of 1939, and the German government recalled all the ships at sea after that, trying to get them to come back home to be used for the war effort. The SS Columbus, which was one of the largest German ocean liners at that time, was down in Mexico, and it tried to make it back to Germany, but it was intercepted by a British destroyer off the coast of Virginia. So the captain and crew scuttled the ship. And their radio signal was the UA. So after Pearl Harbor, a signal was heard. It went off with the watchdog receivers first, and then it was DF'd by the long distance sites across the country. And it turned out it was the radio operator from the Columbus that was now at the German embassy. And they were not supposed to communicate by radio with Germany, especially not after Pearl Harbor and after Hitler declared war on the United States. So basically they were able to shut it down. Here's the plot of the various folks that were involved in hearing that signal and figuring out it was coming from the German embassy. Here's George Sterling talking to Congress, demonstrating and talking about this very case with them later on in the war. And here's a little write-up from that picture there. So how did the RID do in World War II? Well, they investigated over 9,000 signals. They shut down over 400 stations that shouldn't have been transmitting, and that included a couple of hundred spies rounded up down in South America. And also, they assisted over 600 military aircraft, mostly flying between the West Coast and Hawaii, saving the aircraft and crew and thousands of lives. Along that, while cleaning out South America, they came across with a lot of equipment that looked very similar to what the RID was using. I see a Hallicrafter's receiver, a national HRO, some purpose-built German spy equipment in these pictures. In gratitude, one of the countries gave George Sterling one of the German spy suitcase radios. And we're not sure where this radio is, so it's probably out there somewhere. Here's a close-up picture of it. It's the German SE-90/40, which was the most common suitcase radio used by spies, if you will, during the war. One actually showed up on eBay a few years ago. It was kind of confusing. Nobody knew what it was. It had English markings on the front panel, but if you looked inside, it had very strange German technology. So a buddy of mine bought it for a song and hooked up a power supply, and we had a QSO with it and had a very unique chirp on the air. The other thing is, I mentioned that the aperiodic receiver that showed up at Shelby was from New Bern. Well, it turns out there was an RID monitoring team that drove the coast of North Carolina for a few months to determine whether or not there were any people on shore communicating with U-boats offshore. And that team was based in New Bern. They slept in New Bern during the day and drove typically during the night. So I just wonder if that aperiodic receiver, was it misplaced or lost or even stolen from the RID team? Now, since then, there's been a third example found in a collection down in Miami, Florida, and also an original manual, which we didn't have before. And here's the really nice data tag that was found in that third unit. It says Aperiodic Receiver, Radio Intelligence Division, Federal Communications Commission. It's got an NDO contract. The serial number is K3, manufactured by the Kahn Manufacturing Company in Baltimore, Maryland. So that kind of pulls it all together. And, there's more out there. There were probably a couple hundred of these made. So keep your eyes out for something that looks like this. And if you happen to live in any of these cities where they had RID sites in the past, you might have a leg up on other folks, and there might be some equipment out there. Also, it's interesting, Mr. Kahn got with Mr. Ellert, the chief engineer of the RID, after World War II, teamed up together and had an electronics store in Baltimore, Maryland. So here's some further reading. The Foreign Broadcast Information Service history, that's out there on the web. There was also a nice QST, January 1945, with an article about the hams in the FBIS, and also the hams in the RID. And of course, don't forget the wonderful free book, The History of the Radio Intelligence Division, before and during World War II. It's out there on the web. George Sterling also wrote a number of articles for the AWA Review. But probably the most interesting thing we have left talking about the RID is this video called Patrolling the Ether. And it's still copyrighted. You can purchase it as part of this set of 50 short videos from the 30s and the 40s called Crime Does Not Pay from Warner Brothers. And you get it on eBay or Amazon. The video, which is called Patrolling the Ether, actually premiered during the war, April 10th, 1944. It was the first film broadcast simultaneously on more than one experimental TV station in the United States. So it was actually shown simultaneously on 5 TV stations coast to coast. These were centered at the Zenith Corporation's television site in Chicago, Illinois, also these other cities here. And it's interesting, when you watch the video, there's a number of different dimensions of Zenith in the video. For example, here the bad guys are getting away in a Zenith taxi cab. Here's Mr. Bennett from the FCC at the premiere of Patrolling the Ether. Notice the very, very early TV cameras there in this picture. So I'm going to show you some snippets from this video, and towards the end you'll hear references of the signals being jammed, and there at the very end the jamming stops, and it turns out that it's the RID spoofing the foreign station, which has now gone off the air, and talking to the spies and giving them false information. So I hope you enjoy the video.
Last 15 minutes of this is this, so I'll skip through this to round up the meeting here.
To UWB, back to WPRTS. Good evening, Philippe. You're putting in a good, strong signal.
Well, they're trying to do the same thing here. Isn't the FBI taking care of them? Yes, they are doing a great job, but they don't specialize in radio. And today it's chiefly by radio that the enemies within a country hope to get their stolen information out of it. That's why the RID was born, the Radio Intelligence Division. It is our job to police the ether.
Hey, that's a pretty big job. You're sort of an FBI of the airwaves.
Well, you might put it like that. How old are you, Phil?
60.
Today, as a result of such foresight, our country maintains a radio detection network second to none in the world. This unseen vigilance is helping to make the home front safer than at any time since the war began. At strategic points throughout the nation, numerous monitoring stations maintain a 24-hour alert, reporting to the chief of the Radio Intelligence Division in Washington, D.C. From the secret files of RID headquarters comes a typical case of espionage, which, like many others, began when a monitoring station picked up a mysterious message. Automatic tape and disc recorders register the message. The direction finder is rotated until minimum signal strength reveals the direction of the unknown transmitter. Headquarters gets the flash. Bearings from this and other monitoring stations converge on a map. At the point of intersection or fix, the enemy station is spotted. The RID chief contacts the station nearest the fix. Instructions and voice code are transmitted.
21XY, calling 22XY.
And the cruising mobile unit receives the location of the fix.
21XY, calling 22XY.
22XY, back to 21XY.
17QR3, 9J8L, 9.1.
17QR3, 9J8L, 9.1.
Right.
9.1 megacycles.
9J8L. Hey, that's over on the west side of town.
Yeah, it's between Hammond and Kingsley Avenues.
Hey, do you think it's big stuff?
Maybe. Being sent.
Throughout the nation, the monitoring crews are alert, standing by for the enemy signal. Far out in the Atlantic, in the radio rooms of the German wolf pack, men are also waiting. Somewhere in the streets of the city, somewhere in the stream of traffic, the enemy is on the move. After hours of inaction, suddenly the signal comes through.
Got it. 240.
They're coming in. Station 85 degrees.
Once more, the RID men make the fix.
The Yankees. They're jamming the wavelength.
Looks like we can't get through that barrage they're putting up.
Stick with it. We've got to get through.
Watch out, Jerry. We don't want to break any laws.
Still on the alert, the RID men gradually locate the enemy transmitter.
They're still moving, but we've narrowed them down to 4 square miles. Area bounded by 8L, 8R, 6K.
19XY to 21XY,
21XY, back to 19XY.
8L, 8R, 6K. Police stand by to cooperate.
All cars, this is it. 8L, 8R, 6K.
8L, 8R, 6K. 8L, 8R, 6K.
We've got to search all cars coming out of that area. It's now or never.
Trying. think I'm getting through.
Patrol- Patrolling the ether, trapping the enemy within our borders, helping to protect America's home front. These are the men of the RID, harnessing radio to help fight the global war.
Okay. Anybody questions or comments on that?
Hey, Doran, who's the presenter? Where did that entire
Yes, of course. Let me see.
presentation come from?
Radio Intelligence Division.
Antique Wireless Museum, the Antique AWA Communications Technology Museum YouTube channel. Let me reshare this here in a different way, sorry. AWA Communications Technology Museum is where this came from. This was presented by Brian Harrison, KN4R.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, of course.
All righty. Well, any questions out there? Comments or anything? Otherwise, I guess we will give you the rest of your evening back. Appreciate everybody checking in. We'll keep looking for presenters. So, and again, you see anything, hear anything, or come across something, let us know. Particularly let Jeff Irvin know, or any of us. We'll get the word to him. And Jerome, thanks for finding that. That was real interesting. A good one. I'm sure there's a lot of stuff like that out there, just tons of it.
Yep.
All righty. Well, there's nothing else. We'll bid you 73.
Thanks again.